Now, there has been a second night of violence in downtown Johannesburg. Police fired rubber bullets and stun grenades to disperse looters who attacked a foreign-owned stores. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola with more on that.
Whether it's mere criminals or xenophobic violence, the result was much the same. A long night for the police and terrified foreign nationals. Some of them asked to be ferried out of the area under police escort. The clashes flared up on and off for hours in different parts of the suburb, Jeppestown to the east of the city centre. It's the second night of trouble here, a second night in which foreigners have been targeted, and it follows weeks of rising tensions and sporadic attacks on foreign nationals elsewhere. Independent experts blame poor living conditions, particularly in rundown areas like Jeppestown.
You're looking at people being frustrated because they're not being able to find opportunities, they're not employed. So the next thing they do is to take out their frustrations on the most easy scapegoat.
The government has condemned the violence, but says South Africans generally are not xenophobic. I'm Angelo, Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's get more on the situation in Nigeria and South Africa as well. Sophia Dango joins us in Abuja and Angelo Coppola in Johannesburg. Very welcome to you both. Now, Sophia, let me start with you. We suddenly heard that a students' association in Nigeria has given South African residents until the end of today to leave Nigeria, of course, in order to avoid bloodshed. How are events unfolding in Nigeria right now?
Well, Uche, the Nigerian Association of Students really putting out a strong statement that they would attack South African nationals in the country simply based on the fact that they are South African. And those threats, of course, have not yielded any kind of violent attacks, although very strong sentiments coming from an office that's becoming very familiar to many Nigerians and South Africans. The Senior Special Assistant on Diaspora Matters, her name is Mrs. Dabiri Erewa, has come out very strongly and said that South Africa is not taking very seriously the matters that we have been seeing unfolding, saying that South Africa is suffering from a social disease and must recognize that xenophobia is really letting not only Nigeria but South Africa down as well. Really strong worded statements towards the Home Affairs Minister as well, Malusi Gibana, and saying that the diplomatic niceties that have been realized as a response to the attacks are unnecessary, and that there must be measures to protect the welfare of Nigerian nationals who are residing lawfully in South Africa. Uche.
Now, Angelo, we actually spoke yesterday, and when we did, you were heading back out into the streets. Now, we haven't heard about any new reports of attacks today. So what is the situation? Has it calmed down finally?
Well, it's the same as it was yesterday. It was quiet during the day and then flashpoint during the night. So it's been quiet for the first couple of hours in the early evening, but the tactics seem to be the same and fairly straightforward. The groups rest up during the day, and then approaching at 9 o'clock or so in the evening, they start their trouble. It seems that the thugs would have left the hostel before sunset, mixing with the general public as they make their way home, and then they strike while the police are trying to lock down a particular hostel. So it's been quiet for the first 2 hours of darkness, but that could all change in a flash, as it did last night. We could have groups targeting different areas tonight, leaving from different hostels. We simply don't know what's going to happen yet, but we will be heading out into that area tonight to go and see what's going to be happening.
Well, certainly these events have had an impact on the two countries' relations. So, Sophia, based on the Nigerian government's response, how much damage have these recent events done to bilateral commercial ties between South Africa and Nigeria?
Well, Uche, to give you some perspective on the volume in terms of dollars that is realized between trade between South Africa and Nigeria, South Africa and Nigeria yielded almost $2.5 billion in trade in 2008. That number increased to about $3.6 billion by 2012. And those numbers are seeing a steady decline, according to many analysts here, simply because of the relationship between both countries. Now, again, this time last year, President Zuma Zuma made a concerted effort, bringing a delegation to Nigeria to be able to have this dialogue, not only based around business, but also good relationships and extending a hand of brotherliness to Nigeria. But these repeated attacks, or alleged repeated attacks on Nigerians, has seen the foreign offices coming together and really not being able to resolve the issue of attacking Nigerians who are otherwise legitimately working within the country, or for some reason trying to find their way as businessmen or otherwise. And so this is weighing very heavily on the economic trade that of course takes place between both countries, a risk that Nigeria isn't very willing to take at this moment given the current economic situation. Uche.
Now, Angelo, I'm sure you heard Sophia there. Is Nigeria's response ringing any alarm bells in South Africa right now, given the fact that it is a vital market for South Africa, over 120 companies investing there? So what has been South Africa's response to Nigeria's response?
Well, after the initial concern when that MTN office was attacked and looted in Abuja last week, it's been very quiet here in South Africa. On Friday, you'll recall, as Sophia mentioned, the Home Affairs Minister went on a charm offensive with African ambassadors. It seems he's convinced some of the ambassadors that there weren't any xenophobic attacks in South Africa. Of course, physical evidence will suggest otherwise in many instances. Meanwhile, South Africa's head of public diplomacy, Clayson Monyela, told me a short while ago that the Nigerian government had assured South Africa that they're on high alert and that the threat would not be carried out. It appears the two governments have been in ongoing discussions on the issue and share information. And as Monyela put it, they are actually managing the challenge of international migration, which is not unique to South Africa. So for now, it appears that the South African government officials aren't that concerned, but they're keeping a watching brief on what's going on. Uche?
Well, many thanks to both of you, Angelo and Sophia, for those insights.